Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 2011 Chevy Caprice 9C3. Up front is a 6.0 liter V8 and down below is a 6-speed automatic transmission. Now I'm super excited to be driving this here Caprice for a couple of reasons, but first of all, this was a fleet-only vehicle here in the United States. It was only sold to police departments as police vehicles. Now the 9C3 is the detective's car. 9C1 would mean that it was a police car, which would be like a patrol car, highway, things like that. This was a detective car. And so this probably didn't see too much high-speed action, but it still saw fleet use nevertheless. The second reason is because that this is a captive import, meaning this was built actually by Holden down in Australia, which was a sub-brand of GM. They built them down in Australia, and this is based off of Holden architecture and Pontiac G8 architecture, which is really the same thing. And so this is the closest I've gotten to reviewing a Holden so far, but one of these days I'll make the trip down to Australia. But before we get on with the rest of the video, if you are interested in helping out the channel, there's a bunch of awesome links in the description below. One is a Bluetooth OBD2 sensor, would not work on this car, but it will pair to your smart device and help you diagnose issues in your vehicle's 1996 and up. There is con plates, which is a suction cup license plate mount, or cash for cars if you're looking to sell your vehicle. Huge thank you to all of our sponsors, and every purchase helps out the channel. But let's get on with the video. Let's get back to that 6.0 liter V8. Well, there was actually also a 3.6 liter V6 offered here in the Caprice that made 300 horsepower, but this V8 makes 355 horsepower. It's an L77 engine from GM, which isn't technically an LS, but it shares a lot of parts with an LS2, and so it's sort of a mishmash of LS engines. 355 horsepower is pretty good, especially for a naturally aspirated V8, and especially for a fleet vehicle. You know, these things had to be reliable because they were sold to police departments. They rarely were able to get a break, so they had to be reliable. Like I said, paired to it is a 6-speed automatic transmission. It's a 6L80E. It's been around for quite some time, and it's a decently reliable transmission. I don't really mind it too much, and there was no manual option, of course, because this is a police car. They can't have cops shifting gears. That's just, they're not gonna do that. Not bad. Sounds good. Last but not least, the Caprice actually is rear-wheel drive because, like I said, this particular one was based off the Pontiac G8. Shares a lot of architecture with that. It's basically a G8 for all intended purposes. One last thing about the drivetrain I do want to talk about is the ride quality. The ride quality is not great. I am being bounced around in here. It's not very smooth like I would come to know from GM. GM has magnetic ride these days, and even in this era they had magnetic ride. And the last video I did was of a Cadillac CTS-V, which rode beautifully. And so this definitely has a more fleet feeling to it. It's not very comfortable on the road, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to do the job. But with that out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 4 gauges and a screen. On the left is my coolant temperature. Then I have my tachometer, and on the right, I have my speedometer and fuel. And in the center, I do get a little gauge. Now, this is a GM screen, and it gives you a lot of information like you would find in older Corvettes, Silverados, pretty much everything now from GM gives you a ton of information, and the Caprice is no different. On the steering wheel, on the left, I have my controls for that center screen in the gauge cluster, and on the right, I have my volume and phone options. The steering wheel is very basic. It has this hard plastic exterior, which is to be expected out of a police vehicle. To the left of me, I do have my headlight and gauge dimmer switch settings. And on the door, I just get the latch to get in and out. There is no window switches or mirror adjustments on the door, which is kind of interesting. Moving into the center, I do have 2 climate control vents. The stock radio, it is nice that for 2011, in a detective car, in a fleet vehicle, you actually get a decently colorful screen. Now, it's not quite up to modern standards, but for being 10 years old, I'm definitely not mad at it. And I have navigation, map settings, media, aux, phone options, which is really, really nice. Then I have a hazard switch in the center. And moving down, I have some radio controls, track, folder, tune, volume, and then I have my climate controls as well. I do get auto climate controls, which is very nice. Then I get a little ashtray, 12-volt outlet sort of area, and then I have the trunk release and the traction control button. Moving on to the shifter itself, this is the stock location for the shifter. Later Caprices actually had a column shifter, which we'll talk about later on in the video, but this actually has a center mounted shifter. This is actually the knob from a Pontiac G8. So the standard Caprice does not have a leather shift knob, but this one does, like I said, out of a Pontiac. Then we have our window switches, which is very interesting placement. It's very rare to find window switches down here this day and age, and I'm not 100% sure why they would do this in the PPV, because the patrol cars actually got a custom center console, so you'd have to move these switches anyway. I feel like having them on the door would have been easier, but I guess not. I also have my mirror switches and unlock switch right down there. And then I also have this parking brake off to the left that's sort of integrated into the rest of the center console. I really like that look. Then we do have cup holders, so we will do a big friggin' bottle test here in the 2011 Caprice, and unfortunately it fails. Then I do have a little center console armrest, and then we have to talk about the seats. The seats feel very, very fleet oriented. They don't look great, they're not super comfortable, but they do the job, and they have held up really well for 160-some thousand miles. But speaking of seats, we do have back seats, so let's go do a back seat review. Actually, two things I should note before I get in the back. First of all, I do have the red police light. This is the interior dome lights fitted to almost every single police vehicle. The reason it's red is because that doesn't mess up your night vision as much. It doesn't make your pupil dilate as much. So you can have it on at night and you can flip it off and your eyes don't need to readjust. I also have a white light for during the day, things like that, because your eyes don't need to adjust, but at night, use the red light. The other thing I want to mention before getting in back is that I am going to lower the window now. So because this is a police vehicle, they detach the interior door handles. So if you have a perp in the back, they're not going to jump out on you or whatever. So I'm lowering the rear window because the interior door handles in the back do not work. But let's hop in back. All right, so we're in the back of the 2011 Chevy Caprice 9C3, and a couple of things to note back here. First of all, the knee room, the room itself is incredible. Incredible. Really, really good. Better than the CTS-V I just filmed, which the CTS-V is a Cadillac. That's a big body car. No, this is way better. Headroom, fantastic. Leg room, out of this world. I have two climate control vents down there. I do have speakers in the door, which is interesting that they would even take the time. I don't have a center console, which makes complete sense, but I really can't even get over. I wouldn't even mind being arrested in the back of one of these. I'd be big chilling back here. Like, we'd be approaching the jail and I'd be like, hey, can we like do a lap? Like, I'm hanging out. I'm having fun. But like I said up front, and the window switch doesn't work either. So I can't raise or lower the window. That's why I had to lower the window from up front. Let's take a quick look at the trunk. So I already popped it from the inside. However, I do have this little hole here. And obviously not a factory police amp and sub, but as you could tell, the trunk goes all the way in there, which is really, really good. This, of course, was made for police equipment. You could fit a bunch of stuff back here, a rifle case, whatever it might be. One interesting thing back here is that you'll see the batteries right here, but you also get a second battery right there. So this actually has two batteries to run accessories, lights, things like that, and so you're not gonna have to jump start your police car after pulling someone over. The exhaust is modified. I forgot to mention that at the top of the video, modified exhaust, but that is the trunk of the PPV. Now we have to talk about the looks. I really like the look of this here Caprice. I think it's very interesting to look at. Again, whenever I see one, I have a slight heart attack because I may or may not have been pulled over by one a long, long time ago when I first got my license, and it has forever been ingrained in my memory. But also, now that I'm older and I don't speed anymore, I have less of a fear of these cars, I think that they look really interesting and unique because they were only sold as police cars. It's fun to see them driving around now. It's like watching a superhero work a desk job. It's just kind of funny. And I think overall, the Caprice actually is a pretty handsome vehicle. It does have attributes of the G8, some attributes later on of the Chevy SS, both of which cars I also enjoy. So let's get to my final thoughts here on the Caprice PPV. Well, okay, I just pulled into a parking lot and there's one other person and I think I scared the crap out of them. Sorry, not a cop. I think it's really cool to be driving one of these, and I think that these are so interesting, not only because they were fleet-only sales. I've reviewed cars that were fleet-only before. That's fine. But the fact that this was manufactured by Holden, which is basically the main Australian auto manufacturer up until GM closed their doors recently. Holden is as Australian as the Sydney Opera House, or as kangaroos. And so this is an Australian car built to serve American police departments, which is very unique. I have driven also a 2005 and a 2006 Pontiac GTO, another car that was seriously heavily influenced and built by Holden down in Australia. And going off of those cars and this car, I want to shake whoever's hand was running Holden. It just seemed like a very fun company. They built cars that are fun to drive. They built great cars. They loved their big block V8s. They loved rear wheel drive. They built some crazy things. And this is another really truly Holden product that is just so good. And the last thing I wanted to note was the price. Now, the market is always changing, of course, but these can be found for relatively cheap. Relatively cheap. They're not the bargains they used to be before the market inflated, but you can get these relatively cheap through auctions. Police departments are starting to sort of phase these out in preference for Explorers, Tahoes, bigger SUVs. So you can start to find these at auction. This was actually an auction car. This used to be an Iowa Police Department vehicle. So if you want a Chevy SS, you might want to pause for a second and do a quick little search for the Caprice. It just might be worth it. Huge thank you to William for letting me take out his Caprice. And also, I'll be reviewing another white Caprice, but a Pursuit and a facelift version in the next video. So please go check out that video as well. I'll have that linked at the end of this one. I'm super excited to then test out the 2014. It's more based on the Chevy SS and has the column shifter and is a Pursuit vehicle. So it has the different center console and interior and all of those Pursuit features. So please go check out that video. But again, huge thank you to William for reaching out and offering his Caprice. This is such a cool experience. I'm very happy that I was able to do it. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.